tetfu tindzawo tetfu. Indalo yashada nemasiko kuhle kwetfu. Kuvakasha kwethula umthwalo emahlombe etfu. Hloma ngwane vuka uvakashe indlela uyikhombe etindzaweni tetfu. Temvelo nembukiso ungcebeleke uthathe netitfombe. Lalela ke nangu sonkondlo waseswatini akutekela, ayibeka indzaba ayihlela, kuhle kwelijaha lishela ngiyakutshela, diningi tindzawo longativakashela, hloma ngwane vuka uvakashe la, phana lapha kuvakasha kuyayelapha enhlitiyo kanye nemicondvo kuyawuphumuta, kuqinisa buhlobo nebungane losebundenga ndenga, with a trip to Mantenga Falls or a sip among friends of Sibebe Brew on Sibebe Mountain, or perhaps your cup of tea is backpacking and horse riding, sightseeing the seamless streams and springs that stream across the gorgeous valleys of the mountainous kingdoms of Eswatini. We have you covered. Hloma ngwane vuka uvakashe, buhle bethu yimvelo yethu, buhle bethu ngabuthola nasebantwini bethu.
Mbukele ekhaya sikwemukele siphinze sikuvusele eluhlelweni sikhulumisa tinzabalana letiphatselene nemkhuhlane iCovid-19 lapho ke sibuka tinhlelo letitana hulumende kuhlangabetana nalomkhuhlane njengoba sitakhumbula mbukele ukuthi lo mkhuhlane ushaye tinhlangothi letiningi deliver kepha ke na hulumende akakahlali phansi njengoba evikini eliphelile ndvunankhulu usukumise luhlelo lwelukubuka ukuthi umnotfo ungavuswa njani uma sekwengelo mkhuhlane i-post COVID-19 economic recovery plan. So ke sikhulumisa lolo hlelo. Today in the program we have the Minister for Finance Neil Rackenberg. Welcome, Minister, to the program.
Thank you so much, Bosiso.
Minister, we are discussing the post-COVID-19 economic recovery plan, which is worth 30 billion emalangeni. The success of this plan borders on finance. How will the ministry assist in ensuring that these projects are a success?
Thank you, Bosiso. I think obviously what we need to understand first is that not the full 30 billion is coming from government. So about 7 billion of the money is going to come from the government purse, and about 23 billion is going to be coming from the private sector.
Yes.
So I think let me just touch on the private sector. Obviously many of us ministers come from the private sector, so we've got a very good feel and a very good grasp for what goes on there and what's possible. And that is that there's a huge amount of finance available, not only in Eswatini. The liquidity in Eswatini is good, so there's a lot of finance available, but obviously there are single obligor limits. There's limits to how much one company can loan, especially these big projects, as you're going to find in this plan. But there is wonderful finance available outside of Eswatini, international organizations. Hundreds of international organizations willing to fund projects in Eswatini, either US dollar based or rand based finance, for the private sector to be able to access. The problem is you need proper collateral, you need a proper project, and you need a bankable project, and that's what we are looking for. We're looking for credible projects that can access those funds. So in the selection process, as we were going through these plans, we had a very good feeling that the private sector 23 billion plans and the projects that are there are bankable, which was a critical element because obviously there were other requests coming in and maybe people with hopes and plans, but not as credible. So we've tried to really, and again, it's obviously not a science, it's not a given science, we're not 100% sure that each of those are going to happen, but we are very comfortable with the projects that are there, and we are very comfortable funding is available for them. On the 7 billion front, I think we need to understand 2 billion of the 7 billion is the same money for arrears that I've been battling to raise. It's been a bit embarrassing. It's been taking so long to get this money for arrears.
A lot of businesses have been waiting for that money.
You're spot on. You're 100% right. And I keep on saying that the money's coming soon. I've made the mistake of saying sometimes it's within a week or two, and I can maybe just confirm that this money is coming. People are by now saying, "Oh, Minister, just be honest with us. The money's not coming anymore." The money is coming. It has just been a real nightmare getting this money raised. We weren't fully aware of all of the what you call conditions precedent in the loan. So the loan was approved, the loan was signed even, but a lot of conditions precedent that we've been battling to put in place. They virtually are all in place as we sit here. It is really now shortly that this money will land. The money for arrears is still coming. We have taken way too long. We apologize to the private sector out there waiting for this money. But at the same time, the money, it will be coming in soon. But 2 billion of the 7 billion is now that arrears money. 5 billion is really of our capital spend. Understand that every year we spend about 6 billion emalangeni anyway as a nation on capital projects. This COVID plan does stretch over 2. You could even get creative and almost say 3 budget cycles. So we've just identified in this year and next year's budget cycle which projects are critical for the private sector, identified them, brought them into the plan and ring-fenced them as part of this 5 billion. But there's actually 12 billion of capital projects that's going to be going from government into the economy over the period. We've just identified specifically this 5 billion that is almost like private sector, is going to be boosting the private sector directly. For that reason, we ring-fence them and put them into the plan.
So, in other words, these projects were part of those that were budgeted for in the 2020-2021 budget.
Some of them were correct. Some of them are going to be in the 21-22 budget. At the same time, a few of them, for instance, some of the factory shells are new projects that we're saying we really need to try and make a plan, find a way. If we cannot find a way now, make sure that they are in the 21-22 budget. So some of them are, for instance, as I say, factory shells is one of those that are new. It was very obvious in putting this plan together. We needed something special for factory shells to be able to boost the textile industry, give it an extra shove.
One will look at the 18-month period for the plan. Is it feasible to raise that amount of 30 billion, the 7 billion from government and the 23 billion from the private sector?
We definitely feel so. A lot of these projects are already projects on the go. It's not necessarily all new projects. Some of these projects are ones that have already been approved. The private sector is working on them. Raising money in the private sector is sometimes quicker than it is in government, raising the money, and if you have the right things in place. So no, we definitely do believe that this money can be raised in the next 18 months. Correct.
Looking at the financing aspect of this project, what role can local financial institutions play in ensuring that this post-COVID-19 economic recovery plan is a success?
They're a huge part of the plan, and if you look at the teams, the workshop teams that were there putting this plan together, the banks were even involved. And for instance, Vusulelo led one of the work streams, for instance, and chaired that. And for that reason, we definitely believe that a lot of the funding is going to be coming from the banks. The liquidity in the banks is good. There's not even by now through the COVID crisis, liquidity is still good in the banks. There's definitely enough cash in the system to be able to fund projects. But like I say, the very big projects, one will have to go outside the country to be able to get co-financing with the local banks. And even the local banks could be the lead arranger, is what you call it, the one actually putting all of it together. But at the same time, they might need to bring in either South African or international banks to be able to co-fund some of the projects that are, I would say, 100 million plus. You probably find you need exterior funding outside of Eswatini for that.
Okay. Looking at the issue of enablers that have been brought to the table by the private sector, how does government assist with regard to those enablers with regard to the issue of financing the projects?
So I think enablers and financing, we can almost categorize them in two separate things. Enablers are really those things that what does government need to change in the regulations? You might find that the land isn't allocated for industrial land, but the investor has identified that they want to do something special on this land. So governments come to the party and do what they need to do from a regulatory point of view. At the same time, I think the plan is also saying that Eswatini is possibly over-regulated in an economy like ours, moving with the times. One's trying to deregulate, markets and countries, and we need to look at that as a country too. But from the financing point of view, being an enabler, if government does the 7 billion and spends the money on that, be it the roads, the factory shells, in that sense, they enable the private sector to do their co-financing. So you'll find something like the textile industry. We'll have a factory saying to us, if you build me a factory, I will put in all of this plant and I'll employ so many people. I've got the 200 million I need for that. If you can build a factory for 150 million, we can both come to the table. So in that sense, one's enabling the loosening of the 200 million from the private sector by doing what government can do to enable that, as you mentioned.
The minister has mentioned that some of the projects have already been approved. Take, for instance, the road project from Bulembu to Bulanzeni. It's been in the pipeline for some time now. Have we secured the funding for that project as it has been included in this plan?
Correct. So that is one of the roads that have been identified to say it'll definitely unlock. I think the tourism sector was pushing for that because it's a beautiful tourist route. At the same time, I think it's the closest to Nelspruit. There's a few reasons why that road was critical. But the funding of that road, currently we do have a PPP offer on the table. But PPP offers, as much as when I came in as a Minister of Finance, I thought PPPs was the be-all and end-all of how to finance some of the government projects. And I've realized not necessarily the case, because you end up getting finance, you get commercial finance in that space, which is about 2 to 3% more expensive than governments can often get concessional finance, especially for infrastructure. So we are re-looking at that and re-seeing, even though there is a PPP offer on the table for that road, we probably need to re-look at that and say, how do we rather get concessional funding, because there is enough concessional funding out there available for Eswatini. We've never defaulted on debt. We have a good reputation for international funders, and we have enough concessional funding available to us for those kind of projects.
Talking of international funders, the government is working towards securing loans from 3 international funders, being the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the African Development Bank. The loan of the IMF is a bit of a concern. There were questions raised to the minister in Parliament. What were those issues around this loan?
So let me start off just by taking a little step back, and that is that to say that normally we are funding projects or we are funding specific things. With COVID, we actually have a bit of an opportunity where we actually can fund what you call budget support. So you're saying, well, I've got my budget, I'm failing because of COVID, I'm failing to get the money together, my taxes down, I've got issues, and we're actually managing to raise budget support, which means you can use the money for anything that you have in your budget for that year. We're looking at a 3-year kind of budget support, and maybe we can touch on SACU later, because SACU affects us in 3 years. So we are looking at a 3-year budget support strategy. But this year, the IMF has already come to the table. So we're speaking to the IMF, the World Bank, and AFDB for specifically budget support for this year. World Bank, AFDB for the next 2 years as well. Of that, they often look towards the IMF. So IMF is normally a lot stricter. I think in Parliament, I can't recall the words used, but something like ruthless, I think was the words used on the IMF. And one can see the IMF that way, because the IMF normally do not loan money. What they do is you enter into a program. So IMF is really almost the world's supplier of money of last resort, because when a country is almost becoming bankrupt as a country, they will step in and they'll say, look, right, they'll give you cash, but you need to do this. They, in a sense, take control of a program, and if you don't follow the program, you don't get the money. So they help you to get into better behavior and try and do that. But I think my response in Parliament too was the IMF is a little bit, even though they're very strict, and one can probably say harsh, at the same time it's a bit like a father, you know, I mean, you get different kind of parenting skills.
Tongue lashing, but at the end of the day, the father will help you.
Exactly, so the IMF is more the kind of father where, you know, they'll discipline you more often, they'll be very harsh on you. But when you actually get to the point that you're in trouble, when you're in corner, when you're really in a crisis, they are the ones also that stand with you and say, no, we are together now, and now I'm going to help you, my son, to get through this. You know, we're now on the same side. And so from that point of view, the IMF has really been great, and they actually have given us a loan also, and the loan, it's not linked to conditions. So we had to convince them that we are going to be fixing our economy, make ourselves more sustainable, because right now we are too dependent on debt as an economy, and that has to change, not for IMF, for ourselves, for our own economy, country, for us as Eswatini. We need to get our economy more sustainable. So we had to come up with what you call an MTFF, a medium-term framework, to prove that our economy can come out of trouble and be more sustainable, which we did with them, and that was a long process. So you spend a lot of time before the time negotiating and getting things right. But once the loan is approved, now it's a matter of rubber stamping and actually getting the money drawn down. It should actually be drawn down within a matter of weeks as well. So even though the Frexham Bank loan is coming through for arrears soon, this one is also landing, and it'll really make sure that we have a lot of better liquidity in the country and pay all our debts is our feeling. But no, the IMF loan comes without conditions. It is a loan, it is not a program. And I think let that be clear. There are no strings attached from that point of view.
Minister, we have touched on the issue of the country being dependent on loans. It appears that we will soon reach the 35% threshold of debt to the GDP. How will that affect future projects that the country may wish to undertake and need to borrow money from international funders?
So again, I think maybe let me also just explain slightly for the country to understand that without us doing too much, we've accelerated towards a 35%. Keeping in mind that 35% is debt to GDP. Some of our debt is US dollar debt.
Yes.
So which means at the moment the Emalangeni moves to the US dollar, that debt grows without us actually doing anything, without us loaning more money. Our debt book just rises by itself. At the same time, it's a debt to GDP ratio. So now this year we're looking at our GDP possibly going down, which is now having a seesaw effect. So now we've got a double whammy with the dollar becoming more expensive to the Emalangeni. At the same time, our GDP going down. All of a sudden, we find ourselves virtually sitting on 35% without going from 30 to 35% without actually loaning any money at all. So unfortunately, the 35% ceiling is being reached, and we are in a bit of a crisis, and we are going to need to loan some money to be able to get out of the crisis. But the beauty is, and I think what we need to focus on, and that is that with this plan, our GDP will grow. If we can implement this plan, guaranteed our GDP grows, and it grows well. So obviously by the GDP growing, we again climb out of trouble much quicker. Eswatini, because we're a small economy, small country, you can get into trouble very quickly.
Yes.
But again, the flip side is correct. Because we're a small country, we can also get out of trouble quite quickly. So we are hoping for that coming out of trouble quite quickly, that this plan is going to do that for us. If the GDP grows, obviously that ratio changes and we are looking a whole lot better. So no, it is going to go about that. But I think we need to accept the fact that we are going to break the 35% debt to GDP ceiling that the Bretton Woods institutions have put on us to say, Eswatini, try and stay below these. We have, obviously, as you might know, if you compare us with the rest of Africa and especially the rest of SACO and SADC, we are of the lowest. So we're starting from a low base. Everybody is virtually loaning money in the crisis, and their debt to deposits are going up. Many of them are going from extremely high to terrible. Ours is going at least from semi-low just to starting to enter into uncomfortable territory, is probably the right words to use, going into our debt.
So there is a light at the end of the tunnel with this plan?
We definitely believe so, and we believe it's not a train. We believe that there is a real light here, in the sense that it will, because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to move from government being the stimulator, trying to drive the whole lot through. We're not going to get it right. So the government can go so far. You run out of space virtually, because you can only get so much debt. The private sector has to do this. So what we are saying with this plan, and in that sense, it's very unique to other plans, is we are saying, private sector, you are now the stimulator. What tracks do you need? What speed do you need? How can they give you the right fuel? What do you need? How far, And we're saying, right, you take us out of this, and we hook ourselves onto that as a country, as tax and everything else that we do. And the private sector is now going to drive and try and push us out. And we're trying to enable them and to make sure they have the right environment to thrive. Not only investments, but the local companies we have in the country. Critical that they can thrive in this time and grow.
That's it, Minister. For now, maybe we'll take a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll take a few questions from members of the public that will be directed to the Minister for Finance. We'll take a short commercial break. Do stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Refresh your home with Bradlow's Spring Savings. Get your bedroom suite and base set all under one roof with savings of up to 1,000. That's right, savings of up to 1,000. Hurry to your nearest Bradlow's store. Bradlow's, massive savings guaranteed.
365 days, 20,000 liters of coffee, 40,000 flights, millions of miles, thousands of these, and these. Making sure everything is just one thing. Superior. Superior design, superior production, fit, finish, function, superior fabric, style and comfort. And superior same-day delivery. Lewis, the home of superior quality.
TV license quickly and easily with MTN Momo. Simply dial *007 *3 hash and select option 8 for TV license. Enter your national ID number as your reference and the amount you wish to pay. Then enter your PIN to confirm your payment. Once your payment has been made, you will receive a confirmation SMS of your payment. If you're a first-time payer, you get another SMS for your TV license. So legalize your entertainment from the comfort of your home. Pay your TV license the easy and convenient way with MTN Momo.
everywhere you go. MTN.
Welcome back, and we welcome those who have just joined us. Before we continue with the interview with the Minister for Finance, Neil Reckenberg, we'll take a short video clip of questions that members of the public have directed to the Minister for Finance.
I would like to ask the Ministry of Finance about how they would, what's the package going to be about in terms of helping the elderly, because last month they got about 700 Rand, a stimulation package that wasn't actually fulfilled. So what is the plan in terms of helping especially the elderly people in the rural areas now during the pandemic? And in terms of being able to diversify and actually reach those communities.
I want to know what's going to happen to the small businesses that are not doing well. Is there going to be any funds funded to them? Are they going to be considered? Because a lot of businesses are closed down, a lot of businesses are struggling. Can we take into consideration that can we help them in any way, if possible? I just hope that we can resolve something. Thank you.
Ngithanda ukubuza kuMinister weFinance ukuthi kuteni ema-means la ngasendela wona kucekisa emagedeni for ukuthi labo somabhizinisi labancane labakhona ukuthi iphilisa ngekuthi bahambe bothenga ngaphandle kwelive, kungaba nguMozambique, kungaba nguSouth Africa. Siyaconza ukuthi emaveni la ngesheya umnotho yakhona ikhuliswe bosomabhizinisi labancane, ngoba nangabe make ahambile ayocupha uyabuya uthenga sinkose bamfana ubhadala nasisi lohleli ekhaya logadze bamfana nasisi kanjalo uthenga sinkose kakakhe, kuyasitakala kanjalo umnotho uyastimulated.
Honorable Minister, those are the questions from the public. What will be your take? The first one, or rather the last one, suggesting that maybe a relaxation of the regulations to allow small and medium enterprises to go outside the country to get their stock so that maybe they can also help stimulate the economy.
No, thank you. We definitely feel very heavily for the SMEs because what we want to hear is from the questions that the SMEs are badly affected and that they are battling out there, and we agree with it. We understand that. I think hence we've come up with that strategy to try to give people food. So listen, even though we maybe can't, as we don't have enough resources to pay all the businesses money to keep open or to not even keep open, just to continue with their turnovers, let's at least make sure people have got food on the table. But unfortunately, for instance, the one question was, can we go out and open the borders? Unfortunately, we've got no problem with Eswatini going out, for instance. The problem is our neighboring countries not allowing us into their countries, being scared of the COVID, I think is what they're managing, or else putting us into 14-day quarantines. So even an SME can't afford to go in, spend 14 days, buy some goods, come back. At the same time, they're not allowed to go.
Probably spend another 14 days in the country.
Correct. When they come in again, the reverse hits you. So unfortunately, it's going to take two to tango. So we again are hoping that as you see our neighboring countries opening up, we desperately hoping that it'll happen as soon as possible, so that cross-border movement can happen and can continue again. We're comfortable that I think as neighboring countries, we're all doing our best to fight the COVID. We're all trying to manage it as well as we can. And I think opening the borders would not have a big impact on the COVID crisis. Is maybe my personal view, but we understand it to be painful.
Okay, there's the other question on the issue of a stimulus package for the SME sector.
Correct. So I think what one needs to understand with the strategy, we've clearly outlined the SMEs. We focused on SMEs. We really saw what we could do to try and give that boost in the SME space. Because obviously you'll see that we were only focusing on investments over 10 million emalangeni. We understand that's obviously not SMEs. Those are large businesses. Yes. But SMEs, number one, I think what we've done is we've put a revolving fund in place, which the Minister of Commerce has been working on with myself. We are seeing how we are going to get that going. We are looking at one or two other funds that are kind of sitting there idle, not working, maybe joining them up with this SME fund so that we can try and make more cash available for SMEs that could qualify, at the same time lower the requirements from a normal bank where they're saying you need security and a whole set of requirements, normally seeing what one can do to try and make that more accessible to SMEs. But at the same time, I think we do need to be clear, and that is that any business that opens, be it a big business, and obviously I come from that part of the world, what you realize, and that is that the amount of SMEs that naturally build and grow around a big business is dynamic, and it's huge. And that business is sometimes oblivious of the fact that there's an industry growing around the macro business. But what I have seen, especially the industry I come from, where you have a big business that's bringing in cash from outside of the borders into the country, the SMEs in that space do benefit hugely from that. So where there's one big business turning over millions, there are often hundreds of SMEs that are also benefiting somehow from that business, and that there's definitely a waterfall effect of a big business cash that does go into the economy through SMEs. So from that point of view, we believe that the strategy is hugely SME beneficial.
The strategy also speaks to the issue of ease of doing business. One of the areas in which the country is not doing well is access to credit. How do we address that area as we look to implement this plan?
Correct. I think access to credit, we were 63 or something in the world. So compared to other indicators, not that bad actually, but we can always improve. So there's definitely room for improvement in that space. I think we need to be able to, what we do have now, and that is that we do have a lot of people that are banking. We're one of the best in Africa when it comes to the amount of people that are actually are included in the financial space. It's a matter now of making finance available to them. So I saw a number the other day where I think SMEs, only about 7% of them actually have access to finance, which is too low. You're right. So we definitely do need to grow that. I think we need to make sure that our institutions that operate in that space, that are out there trying to provide funding there, that they are empowered, that the FinCorps, obviously we can talk of all the different players in that space, but we need to make sure that they can continue to thrive and grow. It is really a requirement that will be coming out of this. SME growth is critical in any economy.
Okay, let's come to the issue of the finances for the COVID-19 pandemic. The minister says the country needs at least 1 billion emalangeni to fight COVID-19, and he says the money will not be borrowed, but he will redirect some funds. Which are some of those funds that will be redirected to finance this budget?
Correct. So what we've managed to do is we've worked out we probably need about 1 billion emalangeni to fight the COVID crisis. We've managed to stay, all we've done is we've reallocated budget. So in the year that we are in, some things, for instance, travel, we're not going to be spending money this year on travel. So we've moved almost the whole travel budget towards the COVID fight. We've looked at areas to say, and where else can we cut? Things like furniture. It's not in a year of crisis, let's not spend money on furniture. Let's not spend money on elements of goods and services. There's an element of capital projects. We again looked at all the capital projects. Which ones do we feel won't be happening this year? Because some of these capital projects need foreigners to come in to be the consultants or something. Some of them are stalled because of COVID. We managed to move a whole lot of our current budget across the line to say, no, let us rather use let us not go for... Obviously, we now are loaning money for our budget, but our budget has not increased. We've managed to shift budget allocation from area to COVID. Again, we are hoping that we don't actually need the full billion from government. We have had amazing support from private sector, from foundation, the Kirsch Foundation, the international organizations, the EU, UN, the Americans. There's really been a lot of support. The Taiwan have really come to the table to give us a lot of support for our COVID spend, and that's actually also managing to hopefully help us to reduce the actual amount needed from government, just because it's in short supply. So we are hoping that the full billion doesn't actually need to come from the government coffers. A lot of it will have to obviously come from government coffers, but a large portion of that is now coming from our from donors and good people.
We are dealing with a constantly changing pandemic here. Will the billion emalangeni be enough?
Again, that is obviously a $1 billion question you got there. we are not sure. We have budgeted we've tried to budget for a more worst case scenario than a better case scenario. So in my opinion, even if it continues for a few more months, we've still got enough in the budget. If it extends longer than the end of the year, we are going to have to relook our budget and then see what we do again. Again, fortunately for us now, the heavy lockdown that has got a big impact on the economy is relieved. So at least the economy has got the breathing space to be able to continue on a limping basis. Yes, elements are very heavily affected, like tourism, obviously, but a lot of the Eswatini is more sugar, the textile, timber, those kind of industry. Those at least are open and are being able to continue. So we are fortunate from that point of view that the economy is at least back on its feet again and at least walking. We're not running yet, but it's not crawling.
Okay. This has definitely affected the budget. How much will be the impact on the budget of 2020-2021?
So next year's budget, we will have to see how the COVID actually plays out. So if it is still ongoing, some people are saying, look, by the end of the year we should have really have sorted this thing out. Other predictions are saying, yo, this is here to stay. we need to learn how do we live with this thing from now on. Obviously, what we need to do is put more measures in place, protection measures in place as a country, food security, medication, finances, to be able to handle crises better. Because if you think about it, we didn't necessarily go into lockdown because of too many people having COVID. We went into lockdown because we weren't ready for COVID. So if we were ready, we wouldn't have had to go into lockdown, and the lockdown cost us billions. So what I'm saying is rather take the same billions, put them aside, be smart with them, and not have to go into lockdown theoretically. But so I think from that point of view, our budget will look a bit different. Just trying to see how do we prepare ourselves better. How do we make sure that we are more food sustainable? Because who knows what the next crisis looks like. But so from that point of view, the budget might look different. You are correct.
In neighboring South Africa, they are already dealing with issues of corruption when it comes to the issues of fighting COVID, the usage of funds. How are we planning to deal with that as a country, given that during a state of national emergency, some of the procurement procedures are overlooked?
You are correct. So, for instance, NDMA, the main agency handling the crisis, have got what you call a trading account. So it doesn't go through all the normal government processes before bills get paid. And those are straight away red flags. We are used to, as Eswatini too, that if there is corruption taking place, that's the first place to look normally is our trading accounts. So from that point of view, the angle that we have taken on this is, number one, there's weekly reports. NDMA reports weekly to Cabinet, and they've got a detailed explanation on the spend. But that doesn't mean people out there believe it or people out there are comfortable. So what we've done is, I think, a much easier way to handle corruption is just to put it in the light. At the moment, corruption is almost like the Bible says, whatever happens in the dark kind of stays in the dark and festers in the dark, and that's where things happen that shouldn't happen. Whatever you put in the light is difficult for bad behavior and for corruption to take place in the light. So NDMA, for instance, if you go onto their webpage, you'll find that at first they just put on their webpage what is being purchased and what the quantities were. By now, they've grown that, and by now you'll find who they're buying it from, how much are they spending, and who they're spending it to, and what did they buy for that money. So that just by being a whole lot more transparent, I do believe that it's obviously impossible to say there won't be corruption, but I really do believe, as Eswatini, compared to, like you say, stories you hear of neighbors, we're going to be in a lot better space, and I think I really don't believe we're going to have the same issues here as we have seen.
Maybe as we get to the close, it is anticipated that SACU receipts will definitely decrease as a result of the lockdowns. How are we planning as a country to source money outside SACU?
So you are correct. Now, the benefit that we have is the year that we are in, SACU receipts are not affected because this year that we are in comes from previous years' trade that's come into the SACU pool countries. But again, you are 100% correct is to say that the year that we are in is being affected. So the delay effect of this is next year it will be going down a bit. The year after, going down quite a bit. So we do need to plan for that. So we are planning, number one, to be able to fill that gap. By then our taxation and our economy is hopefully back on its feet and our taxation will be fine. It'll be SACU that we now need to fill the gap with. We obviously are in negotiations, on discussions, which are going well, to have budget support to carry us over that period. But I think your real question is to say, what are we doing to become less reliant on SACU? And I think that is something that is being addressed as a country. We do need to, with whatever we're doing, and I think the plan will even touch. It kind of speaks on that. We're becoming more an export-based country, focused on exports, really trying to go even outside of the SACU pool, so that our reliance on SACU isn't as heavy. I think what we need to keep in mind is also that we need to make sure that whatever money we do get from SACU is really linked to our capital spend, that we don't break that barrier. So if there is a kind of all fall down on SACU front, which is not looking like there's a risk there, but if that risk happens, it means we've got no money for capital, but at least we can continue surviving as a country until we can do things to get the capital spend back on track. So if you watch those two together, and the fact that they're semi-balanced, it should give us a semi-level of comfort to say we're not getting ourselves into too heavy reliance, if I can put it that way, on SACU receipts.
There is a concern about the issue of taxes.
In the year that we are in?
Yeah, maybe the increase of income, rather pay as you earn, or those taxes that are paid by people.
I see what you mean. Okay, so at the moment we're not planning on coming with anything heavy in this space. We've been talking for a while. At the moment, we do have an inequality problem. So at the moment, someone like myself, let me put it that way, will be paying a 33% personal tax, which even in the region we feel is quite low. South Africa, it's 45%, so there's a big gap there. But at the same time, our brackets from when you start paying tax are also very low. So be able to help the inequality problem, we do need to possibly look at lifting the higher end. We're talking of taking it from 33 to possibly 36%. It's something I even said in a budget speech of mine, I think year before last. I've really been sensitizing people, say we are looking at this. It's not even being drafted yet at this stage, but we're planning. It is something that we're looking at. But we also have to look at the bottom end. So we don't necessarily say we're trying to make a whole lot of cash here. We are saying we need to try and pass it to the bottom, so that the bottom end, someone earning 3,500 emalangeni a month, shouldn't really be starting to pay PAY, especially not 20%. So we need to look at either reducing the amount of tax that the bottom end starts paying, or lift the brackets so you only start paying from 4,000 or maybe 4,500 a month. It's that we're trying to do, actually, to try and create a bit of space.
Maybe as we wrap up, Minister, what advice can you give to the nation as we look to implement this plan, in particular on the aspect of financing this project?
Man, my advice is just, number one, let us stand together on this thing. At the moment, it's negativity that sometimes we always like throwing rocks at a project and saying, what is negative about this? And there will be negatives. There's never something that's 100% positive. There'll always be elements of negativity to it. And I'm saying as a nation, let's focus on the positives. But again, what I can honestly say is there's going to be opportunities. And entrepreneurs in Eswatini that have got an entrepreneurial DNA to them, that want to look at doing business, there's going to be a lot of opportunities and entrepreneurial space within the next 18 months. Look for it, identify it, fight for it, and get into the game. It's going to be a great time for Eswatini businesses to thrive, to do well. So my advice is, entrepreneurs, it's your time. Be ready, go for it.
Thank you, Minister, for your time.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
That was the Minister for Finance, Neil Rackenberg, discussing the financing aspect of the post-COVID-19 economic recovery plan. That's all we had for you in the program. From me, Sibusiso Ngubane and Mbongwa Dube, it's good night.
Hey, Maswati, la la la, betambilo, Mabasayisa, ale COVID-19.
Mufuna kweshelele ndoseni, mufuna vuselele katsini, ayakuseko khawula, nana kuseko kabula, lalela ngwane svikela kufa.